Good morning, Brooklyn. You all know you can do a lot better than that. Good morning, Brooklyn. Strong, strong, great, great. Welcome to 203 Moore Street, affectionately known as the Solera. It's an urban concept space, and it's run by Sustainable United Neighborhoods, the nonprofit here that's been serving the Bushwick neighborhoods for over 5 years. My name is Jay Solly, and the board was kind enough to select me to be the CEO of this organization. And we are just delighted, truly honored to have everybody in this attendance, everybody tuning in via live stream, checking us out on the World Wide Web. You know, when you're an event organizer, you have the opportunity to kind of see, well, where's everybody coming from? And on our data, I noticed we had Germany, United Kingdom, Tokyo, Japan. Everybody that this went out to is interested in what we're talking about and doing here today. Because where Brooklyn goes, so goes the world, right? So here was what we're talking about. We're at a Clean Energy Careers Summit, and for us, this is a culmination of, dare I say, years of work and effort to bring more green jobs, to bring more opportunities to communities everywhere, but particularly our community here in North Brooklyn, here in Bushwick. So within that, we're looking at how do we get there? We got to get public awareness. That's what this nonprofit does. How do we get there? We get there with implementation. We make sure that the work being done is done by people from our neighborhoods. And then, of course, we got to continue to constantly talk about workforce readiness and make sure that there are enough folks to fulfill the jobs needed by what's coming down the pike with this amazing Climate Act, our landmark legislation. So today, we are just truly excited to have you here. With 20 years in workforce and public affairs work, one of the things I can tell you is it's great to be needed. And we need you, everyone in this audience now, more than ever. So we're going to have a really rich day. We're hopefully going to get you some information that gives you something to chew on and think about. Hopefully, you'll get a chance to meet some folks and network and maybe share your resume. Can't guarantee you a job necessarily on the spot, but the opportunities in the clean energy sector are boundless here in New York State. And so we're going to walk through a little bit of an agenda today and tell you what you're going to be seeing as we share. We have a morning of panels and a great break, and we'll get into the job fair. But who better to walk this through it than our friend Betta Broad from New Yorkers from Clean Power. Betta.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks so much. Great to see you all. Thank you for being here. My name is Betta Broad, and as Jay mentioned, I've been working on a campaign called New Yorkers for Clean Power for the past 7 or so years, and working in clean energy for a little bit longer than that. I also play a role at an organization called the Association for Energy Affordability, AEA, which is also going to be here today. And I know folks are really looking forward to speaking with you all during the lunch, at the job fair. But first, we're going to have a presentation from my colleague, Cal Trumann, who's the Education and Careers Coordinator at New Yorkers for Clean Power. And Cal's going to be presenting Working for Change, Green Jobs to Fight Climate Change. And Cal, yeah, come on up. We're so lucky to have Cal. Then we're going to have a panel of clean energy industry professionals that will talk about the opportunities in clean energy. I really encourage you to ask questions, express concerns, participate. We want to hear from you all. And then we're going to have a break for lunch. Would love to get some pictures in front of the step and repeat back there and meet you all. And then we'll get back together for another panel with more clean energy careers professionals, and they'll talk about training and education opportunities and really how to access a clean energy career and what the pathways are. And then we'll have a job fair from 2 to 5, which would love you to stick around for as long as you like. And again, so great to be here. Really appreciate Jay and Sun for hosting us. And thank you all for your time and energy, and really excited that we're here today taking a big step forward in scaling up equitable clean energy careers pathways in New York. So thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you. So as Betta said, my name is Cal Trumann. My pronouns are they and them. I am the Education and Careers Coordinator for New Yorkers for Clean Power, which means I spend most of my time breaking down complicated climate and clean energy concepts so that they aren't so jargony, and they're easier for people to understand because a lot of it is very complicated. It doesn't have to be. And also work on helping people get good green jobs. I myself was a solar installer for many years. I worked a bunch of other green jobs in this city and elsewhere. I worked for the NYC Cool Roofs project, and I saw some folks from the there's the AmeriCorps program, a bunch of folks were wearing hoodies for, and we were colleagues at the time, so that's cool. So glad to see you here. Let me make sure my clicker's still working. This is usually a 40-minute presentation. We're gonna do it in 30, so time me. Okay. And my colleague Melissa's not here today because she's on a very well-deserved vacation. So New Yorkers for Clean Power, our general purpose as an organization is to help New Yorkers transition to a cleaner, greener economy as quickly and fairly as possible, to advance solar, wind, energy efficiency, clean transportation, and building electrification. I will explain what all of those mean in a minute. And to advocate for and support good jobs in these industries for all communities in New York. Let's see, wrong button. Amazing. So usually I do an icebreaker because this will be in a classroom and we say, okay, go to that side of the room, go to that side of the room. I'm not gonna make you get up because we got all these chairs in the way, but I'm gonna have some shows of hands if you're up for that. So let's see. I would like to start with a practice question. Raise your hand if you agree with this statement. I spend too much time on my phone. It's working, thank you. Exactly, okay, great. That, I believe in you, you can fix that. Let's try, I am passionate about environmental issues. If you're like, no, I really care about the environment, great, amazing. It's not a prerequisite, but I'm glad to see it. I know, so usually I phrase this, I know what to be when I grow up, or I know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm gonna keep it phrased like that, you know what it means. A lot of adults too are like, I don't know what I wanna be when I grow up. Okay, a little less certain. How about, I talk to my peers about climate change. We chat about it all the time, it's chill, it's maybe not chill. Okay, great. I honestly talk so much about it at work that I try to avoid it with my friends, but it still comes up. I'm happy with the amount of education I've received on climate change in school, whether you're a student, whether you've recently been a student. Like, no, I feel like my school's getting it right. We're getting plenty of climate change education. So few hands. Okay, and I'll make sure to stay on the climate change slides. And I want to work in a green job in the future. Green job, I know what that is. I know I want to do it. Hey, that's amazing. Well, you're in the right place. And last question, I'm hopeful for the future. Okay, we got some sensitive hands, we got some strong hands. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for indulging me. One more thing, I want to get a sense of the ages of people in the room. Who do we have here who's still in high school? Anybody still in high school? Okay, we're a little older than that. We have like early 20s, 18 to 24 maybe. Okay, or around there. Okay. 25 or older. Yeah. Great, terrific. Okay, just so I have a sense of who I'm talking to. Thank you. Okie dokie. So I don't like to have a ton of text on the slides. We're gonna read through this one and then it's gonna be mostly pictures for the rest because I prefer that. Oh, and I should say, I'm sorry, the logo in the corners, New Yorkers for Clean Power, there's also Solar One. Our partners Solar One, who are based in the city, helped us put this presentation together and they also give this presentation. So when I say, you've heard all of these terms before, I'm gonna define them just so that we all know we're talking about the same thing when I refer to them. So greenhouse gas emissions, you'll sometimes hear greenhouse gases or carbon emissions. Greenhouse gases are things like carbon dioxide, methane, even water vapor, any of those gases that go up into the atmosphere and then trap heat. So we need some of those, otherwise the Earth becomes super cold and we're like Mars or we're like the moon, it's not warm enough for life. But when you get too much of those greenhouse gases, it gets hotter and hotter, and then that's not good either. So greenhouse gases are those gases that are really important to have the right amount of, and emissions it just refers to releasing those gases into the atmosphere. So greenhouse gas emissions. Net zero, when people are like, we're gonna reach net zero by yada, 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 what does that mean? It means you're not releasing any more of those greenhouse gases than you're able to pull back out and store forever. That's called sequestering. It's worth noting, it's really hard to take greenhouse gases out of the sky and store them forever. So when we talk about net zero, the thing we need to be doing is not releasing those gases because they're really hard to get back out. Renewable energy, you know what that is. That's solar, that's wind, that's those big hydropower dams or little hydropower dams. It could be ocean energy, there's all sorts of stuff, but it's energy that renews on a human time scale. Fossil fuels, those take millions of years to build up. That's not a human time scale. And the electric grid refers to equipment like power lines, the big transformers, things like that are used to move electricity around a place. So New York State has its own electric grid. When we talk about we need to green the grid, it means we want the electricity that's going onto those power lines to be coming from clean sources. You with me? Amazing, thank you. All right, let's do this. So what happens to the planet and to us when we dig up and burn fossil fuels? So again, when I say fossil fuels, what we're talking about is stuff like coal, oil, gas. It could also be jet fuel, gasoline, but these are the big ones, right? So this is the only graph in the presentation because graphs are a little bit rough. So we've got this line. I know it's hard to see, so I'll explain. So it starts at 1880, and it goes to about 2010, so not quite current. But there's a line going up in the middle. And that line in the middle is showing how much carbon dioxide, so that's one of those greenhouse gases, is in the atmosphere. And then we've got the blue bars and the red bars showing what the average temperature was that year. Now, the line starts in 1880. That's where the graph starts. Does anyone know why we would start the graph in 1880? I see one hand. I see a couple of hands. I see another hand. Who wants, yeah, let's go. The Industrial Revolution. That's exactly right. Right, so what happened in the Industrial Revolution? Burning coal, exactly. So we went from most of our activities in our daily lives, we were powering them ourselves. You were digging a hole with your own body, or you had a horse helping you plow or like ride the horse to the next town. We were using, small-scale energy, people energy, animal energy to get around for the most part. And we transitioned to using fossil fuels. So we start with coal, we add oil and gas. There's a weird little dip around World War II, but the trend is up. And as the carbon dioxide goes up, the temperature average goes up. If you have a test tube, and you have a test tube you fill with air, and a second test tube that you fill with carbon dioxide, and you shine a light on them both, that carbon dioxide will heat up. It's just a chemical reaction. So, yikes, right? So, what that leads to is things like heat waves, right? It leads to things like natural disasters. This is wildfire smoke from the West Coast as seen from the New York Harbor. Air pollution, which causes health problems, things like asthma, right? Which is super common. You've got things like soil and water pollution, which is not great. It hurts the economies when you're pulling out these fossil fuels. That's bad for the economy in the places that you're mining and drilling. And so, generally speaking, it's just a bad situation, right? So this is what we've been doing. Since the 1880s, roughly, we've been powering our lives with fossil fuels. And the consequences, we didn't know at the time, right? But we know now, they're bad. So we need to do something else. So what do we do, right? What do we do? What is that something else? I'm going to skip, no, here's how we're going to do this. Usually this activity is breakout groups, and we don't have time for that. But I will popcorn. So I'm going to drink some water, and I'm going to ask you to think for a second about something you're concerned about related to climate change, and then I'm going to take like 2-3 hands. So let's start with that. I'm going to drink some water. You think for a second. All right, who we got? A couple of hands, something you're concerned about. What you got? Flooding, absolutely.
What it does to our farms, basically?
Yeah, to farms. Hurts farms, absolutely. I'm going to go in the back here, yeah. Climate refugees, yeah, people who have to leave the place that they've lived because they can't live there anymore because the climate is inhospitable. What you got?
Weather.
The weather in general, absolutely. We got 1, 2 more? Yeah. How can we protect our infrastructure, right? Who here is old enough to remember Superstorm Sandy? I said this to a high school class. They were like, what was that? And I felt old as hell. What is something, now that we've talked about feeling stressed, what is something that brings you hope for the future? Think. Yeah. New technology, absolutely, new technology. I want to see some new hands. Folks in the back, does anybody have something that brings them hope? I'm summoning an answer with my little fingers. No? 1, yes. Say it again? Newer generation, like newer sources of energy? Is that what you mean? Oh, the youth, yes. Generation like age, thank you, yes. Although that one I'm always a little dicey on because like it shouldn't be their responsibility. But yeah. Progressive legislation, good laws. Finally. All right, I have one more. Did you have a hand? No, okay, I'll leave you alone. All right, thank you for indulging me. Now let's talk about what we're gonna do instead of burning fossil fuels, because that ain't working for us. So in 2019, New York State passed the most aggressive climate legislation in the country. And it's still up there as most aggressive, you know, there's some in the running. But some of the points in the bill, which is now the law, which is we call the Climate Act because CLCPA is too many letters. Net zero emissions by 2050. So we talked about net zero. It doesn't mean nothing is emitting, but it means we got to pull out anything we emit, so it's got to be not much. By 2050, right? So it would be nice if it were sooner, but I understand the practical reasons for 2050. Achieve a fossil fuel-free grid by 2040. So you notice that that's not a renewable grid, that's fossil fuel-free. And the reason for that is that we're not trying to phase out, the state decided we're not trying to phase out all of the existing nuclear at the same time we're phasing out all of the fossil fuels. And I get it. The environmental impact of nuclear doesn't include greenhouse gases, so they're leaving those alone for now. And ensure a just transition, including dedicated funds to disadvantaged communities. Now, disadvantaged communities is a term of art, and what they mean is people who are burdened, impacted by climate change, who didn't really do much to cause it, right? So you got rich people in private jets, they're, you know, causing big problems. But the folks who are bearing the brunt of it are not usually the people causing the problem. So that's what we mean when we say disadvantaged communities, and it just means that a huge chunk of the resources need to be going to folks who aren't causing the problems and not just, we have all of these great rebates, let's give them all to rich people, right? So that's cool that I made it into the law. How do we reach these goals? So obviously we need a ton of renewable energy, like so much. The targets are really high. We don't have any target for onshore wind yet, but there's a ton of offshore wind, solar. We're gonna need a lot of renewable energy to replace all of the fossil fuel energy that we're taking off the grid. Transportation needs to be powered by renewables. Most of that's gonna be probably electric. There are a couple other technologies. All school buses in New York State are gonna be electric by 2035. So that's cool. That'll help with asthma, right? We love that. Come on, clicker. We need to electrify our buildings. These are kind of wonky illustrations, but they're basically, you can't even see them, but they're showing like geothermal and like air source heat pumps. Basically, this is heating and cooling that can be powered by renewable energy that's super, super efficient, so that we don't have to burn gas, we don't have to burn oil to heat our homes, to like cook on the stove, things like that. And then we also need to waste less. So this is like a little compost picture. But essentially, making things takes energy and resources, and when you throw those things away, it causes problems. And so the idea is to see what can we reuse, what can we give a second life, what can we repair, things like that. And then the final element, this is the cheesiest stock photo I know, but we need workers, right? So people need to install these solar panels. They need to organize these composting programs. They need to build these heating and cooling systems. They need to be able to fix these electric buses. Like, they need to sell the systems. They need to design the system. So there's a ton of work that needs to go into this transition. A ton of work. We will need over 200,000 new clean energy jobs by 2030. What year is it, right? We got under 7 years. 200,000 new jobs. So the statistic is a 54% increase by 2050. That's a little farther, but if you assume there's 100 people in New York State currently doing one of these jobs, you're gonna need 154 of them, right? That's what that means. So more by half, over half. So this is just an immense amount of new jobs in these industries. And so there are a lot of careers that could be considered sustainable, things like becoming an artist. You know, there are a lot of people who are visual learners. We need to communicate about climate change. We need to communicate about like, oh, you used to get your energy like this, now you're gonna get it like this. And having people who can design or, you know, make videos, things like that to explain those things is gonna be really important. It is currently really important. Engineers, you know, farmer is actually a really interesting one. Farming is one of the very few ways we know to effectively pull greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and store them semi-permanently. Right now, farming is adding greenhouse gases, but if you do it right, you can pull them out. So that's a cool job. Journalists to talk about it, because right now it's all doom, right? We need to see some good news. We need to talk about solutions. Scientist, urban planner, there's tons of things you can do. Public health, incredibly important when there's heat waves and things like that. So All of these could be considered sustainability careers, right? Or green jobs. But we want to talk a little more in depth about specifically clean energy jobs, because those are sort of a subset of these green jobs. And for example, this is a headline from Grist from January this year. To get off fossil fuels, America is going to need a lot more electricians. A shortage of skilled labor could derail efforts to electrify everything. So think about it. If we're going from having a ton of stuff that runs on gas and oil, and all of that stuff is suddenly going to run on electricity, right? And we're installing all of this new electrical generation capacity, like all of these solar panels, all of these wind turbines, we need electricians, literally just electricians. There are a lot of more specialized jobs, but even just literally electricians, we don't have enough in the state of New York to get this transition right. So think about that. So here we're going to do 3 specific job sort of spotlights. And these slides were put together by Solar One, which I appreciate. That's why there's more text. So the #1 fastest growing job in the United States is solar installer. It's also the #1 coolest job. So solar installers, you know, you're outside all day. Sometimes you're climbing up a ladder on a roof. Sometimes you're in a field carrying stuff around. The average salary, you know, is probably a little over $50K. It depends on where you're based, but $50,000 a year, okay, that's nothing to sneeze at. The benefits are usually pretty good for solar installers as long as you're working for a decent company. There's a couple of dirtbags, but mostly they're excellent. And so if you like to work outside, if you like to work with your hands, if you're interested in problem solving, if you like an environment that changes a lot from day to day, if you have ADHD and don't want to sit in front of a screen, guilty, then it's helpful to have a job like this where things are fast changing and really dynamic and really exciting on the day to day. To get into this, you don't need a college degree. You can have one. I have a college degree and I had one when I started solar, but you typically don't need that. Most employers will want you to have some experience working with your hands and will like it if you can show that you've worked outside because people will show up for the first day of the job and be like, oh, I don't want to climb a ladder, you know? So they have to know you're good with heights, you're good with working outside, and you're good working with your hands. But beyond that, like most of that training will be on the job. So, am I talking too fast? Are we good? Amazing. I love presenting in the city. So this national organization called IREC has put together a handful of career maps that are really cool. We're not going to go into them, but I am going to point at it. So you pull up the website, and it's got these like colorful stripes with dots on them, and you click on a dot, and that dot will be entry-level solar installer. And you go, okay, well, if I start with that job, that's great, but what do I do in 5 years when I want like a promotion, or even fewer than that? And it'll sort of shoot out these rays and point to other dots on the map and say, well, with the skills you get from solar installing, you could become a project designer. You could go into sales and sell the systems. I know a lot of people who did that path. You know, you could become an engineer if you wanted to go back to school, and maybe your employer would pay you for it. So it sort of helps you visualize, well, like, okay, here's this job that I could get, but then what, right? So these career maps are really cool. So there's one for solar. There's a couple of others. We'll look at them. And the link is right there. I don't know if you want me to read that? No? Okay. A second green job that is growing fast that we need a lot of is energy auditor. So an energy auditor is a person who essentially comes into a building. It could be your house. It could be an apartment complex. It could be, you know, a warehouse like this. And it's like, okay, where are you using energy? How are you using energy? And where could you use less energy? So they might figure out where you've got drafts and be like, okay, seal that up, seal that up. They might look at your heating and cooling systems to see if they're working to their full potential or if you want to maybe replace them with something that will take less energy, whether that's going to be cost effective. They might suggest that you get insulation installed, things like that. And so that is a career that doesn't usually involve a lot of heavy lifting. It might involve going into attics or basements, you know, so maybe a little icky sometimes. But it's a lot less of the like heavy lifting, climbing type of stuff. So if you have a really good eye for detail, if you're interested in making things work better, if you like looking at a whole system and figuring out how can I make the system work better, that's something that you would do as an energy auditor. And from there, you could go into other sort of building science jobs, which are like the energy auditor, but they're like a little higher level. For that job, the salary range is really huge. It kind of depends on who you're working for. It can be anywhere from like the low $40,000 a year to over $100,000 a year. I know you like the sound of that. So, and some of it's also on a computer, you know, so it's sort of a mix of walking through buildings, looking at things, working on the computer. And there are certifications that you need for that. It's also advisable to learn how to install some of the equipment you will later be inspecting. So some places will have you do more of the hands-on before you get into doing the audits yourself, but it really depends on who you work for. So that's the second job. And there is a green building career map also for all those different building path, or job paths, I should say. I'm gonna give our new friends a second to get their seats, and I'm gonna drink some water. Oh my gosh, there's a flood of people. Hello. There's some seats up in the front here. If there's not enough chairs, we'll get you more chairs. A few in over here in this sort of side by the wall. Yeah, we got some over there. So yeah, these IREC links are useful. This is just greenbuildingscareermap.org. All right, while our folks are getting settled, I'm gonna go into the third of the job spotlights, and that is the number 3 fastest growing job in the US, which is wind turbine technician. This one, you gotta have a strong stomach, because you gotta be up really, really high. But if you want starting salary of $100,000 a year, and you don't mind traveling a little bit, might I suggest wind turbine technician. So this is one of those, you're outside, you're in the elements, you gotta work cold or heat. You gotta be able to climb sometimes. I think a lot of the wind turbines these days, they have sort of like little elevators in them, essentially. But you do have to not be scared of heights. That said, the training is usually a 1 to 2 year certification program. Right now in New York State, most of those programs are on Long Island, so pretty close to Brooklyn, right? So if you're interested in something like this, you could get that training pretty close to home, and then have like an extremely lucrative job without a ton of time in school. There are wind farms already approved to be built around Long Island and around New Jersey to power New York City. Right now, New York City gets most of its electricity from gas, and that's not gonna work, right? So we're trying to shift more of that load to these offshore wind turbines, and so we need people to install them. So if that sounds interesting to you, there are options for that. All right. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of resources. These are mostly things that New Yorkers for Clean Power has put together that we offer to you if they're useful. First off, we have our green job map, it has a little under construction because this news is so fresh I couldn't even update my slide. But we've had an intern who's a geography student help us fix the map so that it works better, and he just finished. So this map is live at ny4cleanpower.org/clean-jobs-ny. And things like internships, job training programs, actual jobs, people send them to us and they go on the map. At its peak, we had hundreds of jobs and trainings available. Right now, we're getting the map back up, so it won't be quite as many, but it is a really cool resource. Please check back and take a look if you're trying to figure out like, oh, well, what's available? What do I want to do? NYCP, which is the State Office of Renewable Energy, also offers paid internships and job training in clean energy and climate justice fields. Those are for folks as young as high school, actually. So you can be older, but you can also be pretty young and look into these programs. So they also have a lot of ways to get trained. And as you can see, there's like a cluster in the city, so lucky you. New Yorkers for Clean Power has a youth webpage that lists things like educational resources, as well as there's a list of like museums you can go to learn more about climate change in person. There's also like K through 12 resources, so if you have like a little cousin or something and you want to give them some knowledge, you could try taking them on a field trip to the museum. There's an app called Climate Action Now that some of our partners put together that we add actions to sometimes. This is on here for like well, I want to do something today. What can I do today? I'm stressed about the climate. The app helps you contact your elected officials, whether you're old enough to vote or not. You also can learn about various climate-related things. So my favorite thing about this app, though, is it makes it really, really easy for me to harangue my senators and harangue my representatives and harangue my county officials. So I think one of the best ways to get good laws like the Climate Act passed is to tell the people who are supposed to represent you that you think they're doing a bad or good job depending on what they do. And this app makes it really easy. So I do recommend the Climate Action Now app. The Student Climate Coalition is an organization that formed itself after NYCP held a summit in 2019 about climate solutions. Their URL is studentclimatecoalition.org. We're sort of their parent organization. They mostly gather online. This is for high school and college students. And they do things like they put together a toolkit on how to get solar panels on your high school, which is pretty cool. But they also have occasional like Minecraft night to just like do something calm together, which is very nice. So that's what I have for you. Those resources at the end are just for your reference. These are some photos I took while installing solar panels. New Yorkers for Clean Power is on social media at NY for Clean Power, and Solar One, if you want to look them up, is at Solar One Green Design Lab, or solar1.org. So that's it for me, unless anyone has particular questions, but I think most of you are going to ask questions of the panelists, not of me. So, amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Cal. That was great. And are we sure nobody has a question while our panelists are coming up? Anybody? Oh, we have a question from Aaliyah, right? Yes. Yes.
Oh, thank you, actually. For the job that had to do, sure, okay. So for the job that had to do with solar panels, I think you mentioned about Minecraft night. That was so interesting, and I wanted to know what was it called exactly?
Okay. Thank you. Great question. You might have to repeat the question.
So, yeah, I want to make sure I understand also. So you were asking about the Minecraft night. That was the Student Climate Coalition. So studentclimatecoalition.org. I can say it again if you want, that's fine. Perfect, okay, great. Yeah, so that's the group that I would look at if you were interested in working with other students and also socializing with other students who are concerned about climate. And then which job were you asking about? The solar panel job? Yeah, so that #1 fastest growing solar panel installer? Yes, there are tons of jobs in solar installing, including in the city. And there are also really great places to get training for it in the city. So if you're interested, you can follow up with me after, or you can go to our website. But yeah, if you want me to email you personally, I can do that, yeah. Anyone else interested in getting sent resources or anything like that? I'm happy to follow up individually. Yeah, what you got? Amazing, yeah. So somebody else who's also interested in solar installing. That's terrific. It's a great job. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Yeah. So I'll give each of you my card. Yes?
Can you get your own solar panel, and if so, how much?
How much does it cost to get like a solar panel to have one?
Yes.
Around $300. If you want just like a regular rooftop solar panel. But then you'd have to attach it to something, and that equipment would be additional dollars depending on what you want to attach it to. I see our panelists are just about ready. What do we got? I see 2 more hands, and then I'm going to hand it over to the panelists.
I was curious about the wind farming.
Wind farms. Yeah.
How long does the training go about for that?
Okay, so the training for the wind turbine technician, that's a 2-year, roughly 1 to 2 year training. It depends on which program you go through. But most of those programs are on Long Island. So I'm going to like make a mental note, give you my card, give you my card, give you my card. So, yes. Amazing. Okay. Then I will walk through and be like, who wants to talk to me? Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Betta and wander through handing out business cards.
Thank you so much, Cal, and thank you for the great questions. We're also going to have some tables in the back, and you could sign up for the New Yorkers for Clean Power list and then also get connected to Cal that way. So yeah, and keep the questions coming for the next panel. Really, really great questions. So Uchena, my wonderful colleague Uchena Bright from Environmental Entrepreneurs is going to be our moderator. So thank you so much, Uchena, and I think everybody,
Sorry, this is just, I didn't bring quite enough business cards, so I'm going to hand out a couple, and then if you want to talk to me at the table after, okay? And we can connect one-to-one.
Wow, this is such a great group. Can everybody hear me okay? Raise your hand if you can. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So my name is Uchena Bright, as Betta mentioned. Our panel today, we have awesome panelists here, and we're gonna introduce our panelists in a second. Today we're here to talk about the many opportunities in the clean energy economy in New York State. So I'm excited about this conversation, and our panelists are experts in sort of looking at the deeper dives into the jobs that Cal was talking about a little bit earlier. So just to introduce myself a little bit, my name is Uchena Bright. I am the Northeast Advocate for E2, which stands for Environmental Entrepreneurs. We are an environmental advocacy organization, and our members are business leaders, and we bring business voices to decision makers, lawmakers, policymakers to affect environmental policy in a positive way, and especially from an economic perspective. So jobs, economic growth and opportunity, and that is some of what we're here to talk about today. So I'm gonna start with introducing our panel with a question for each of you, which is, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and your work in New York State? So I'm gonna start with Carl Williams here, the head of US Energy Storage Development at Equinor. So Carl, please tell us a little about yourself, your company, and your work in New York.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Uchena.
Oh, it might. Can you hear?
It's on? Okay. So my name is Carl Williams. I'm with Equinor, U.S. Holdings. Equinor is a international, maybe they say global, energy company. Original business was in oil and gas, but realities of today's world is forcing them to transition to more renewables. So it's a big chunk of what we do. Equinor is also the largest offshore wind developer in New York State. Our first project is gonna land its production here in Brooklyn, New York, South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, and that's expected to come around 2027. But offshore wind is the core of what we do, but we're a broad energy company, multi-tech, and so we would be doing solar, utility scale solar. We'll be doing onshore wind where it makes sense, and of course, offshore wind. I think that's a good place to stop.
Yeah. So Pete Rose is next.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. Yeah, Pete Rose. Going to check ages in this audience. Anybody know who Pete Rose is? Anyone? It's okay. Sorry, he was a baseball player. And how about our teams here in New York? Playoffs. Everybody happy about that? Are we feeling good? Everybody know about the baseball history right here in Brooklyn? Everybody know what happened on April 15th in 1947? Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. First Black American to play. So there's a lot going on in Brooklyn. It's wonderful to be here. I work for Hydro-Quebec. Hydro-Quebec's the largest producer of renewable energy in North America, and we do it primarily with water. So the oldest form of power. Running water turns a turbine, creates electricity. Why I'm here today is we were selected by New York State with our partner transmission developers to build the largest underground transmission line in North America from Canada, and it'll terminate in Queens. It's under construction now. It's called the Champlain Hudson Power Express. It's going to bring base load hydropower, and for wonks like me, I'm going to try to translate it. Base load means always available, 24/7, right? We learned about different technologies. We have intermittents that are like solar and wind that have really high factors, but they are also limited at times by whether it's windy or solar. That's why me and Carl, we work really well together, because we're gonna balance out the entire system here with clean energy. Hydro, the wonderful wind and solar and battery technologies that are coming in. So this line, the Champlain Hudson, has 1,400 union jobs. It's a union-focused project, and I'll get more into details later, and I can talk about the different types of jobs. And we also have a green economy fund, which is really important. So it's, talking about the transition, a lot of clean energy is going to come into New York City. The other T is training. So we have this green economy fund. It's $40 million over the next 15 years that's available for green jobs training in disadvantaged communities. So getting people on pathways to jobs. And so I'll stop there.
So we've got transmission, renewable generation, and now, and Pete also, he got me with the Pete Rose question earlier. I was like, I don't know. So, and now we're moving on to Max, Levitsky with Solar One. And Solar One leads, I think, K through 12 environmental education with a focus on STEM. But Max, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself, your company, and what you guys do in New York State.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So Solar One, who collaborated with Cal on his awesome presentation, was that very helpful for everybody? That was super insightful. Thank you, Cal. Solar One is a renewable energy nonprofit based in Long Island City, and we focus on connecting a lot of the opportunities like Peter and Carl are working on to the communities across New York City and all the 5 boroughs, and specifically focusing on LMI communities, historically marginalized communities, and how all New Yorkers can take advantage of these renewable energy opportunities of the future. So I'm a senior director. I oversee our Green Workforce Program. We partner with a lot of other great nonprofits across New York to provide hands-on hard skills training in workforce development to train people for a lot of the jobs that Cal was talking about in his presentation. So that's things like solar installation, building operations and maintenance, but also jobs that are maybe not what people think of as green jobs, but have transferable skills to become green jobs. So what I mean by that is the incorporation of energy efficiency and sustainability in a lot of day-to-day places, which over time is going to add up to make a lot of change in the carbon reductions we're looking for. And I'm here to help bring awareness to all that.
Thanks, Max. Julia Lucci. So Julia is with Stephen Winter Associates, which is an energy sustainability and accessibility consulting service firm that specifically works in buildings, in the built environment. Whole building, takes a whole building approach to design. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi. Yeah, so my name is Julia. I've been working at Stephen Winter Associates for about 7 years, 6 years, something like that. And yes, so differently maybe from many that spoke so far, I'm more focused on the built environment. So we work with buildings, with consultant design teams and construction teams to create buildings that consume less energy and also that creates a more comfortable and healthy indoor environment. I have an accent, so I know that everyone here is trying to guess which I'm Italian, so I'm going to usually say this right away. So yeah, when I first came here, I also work in solar as well a little bit, and we did do some solar services at Stephen Winter, but very little. It's definitely not what we focus on. We actually send all our team to Solar One at this point. I work a lot in New York City, but not only. We spread along the Northeast. I'm in the New York City office, so I work a lot in New York City, but also New Jersey, Long Island, upstate a little bit, etc. In New York City, I'm focusing on new construction mostly, but we do also retrofits and rehabs. New York City new construction is a lot of affordable housing. So this is what we do a lot, which not everyone knows how many requirements have for actually high performance and energy efficiency. So this is what we do a lot, and we work with those teams trying to, having the best, their investment, make them, the return of investment on what they're trying to do with their buildings, make them worth. So, yeah.
That's great. So we really have all of the sectors covered on this stage right here. I mean, renewable energy, transmission, how your energy gets from one place to the other, workforce training development, and coordination, and then also the built environment. So we're really gonna talk about the many opportunities within all of these sectors, and the first question is going to be about the jobs. And this is really to build off of what Cal was talking about earlier, and so, you know, Cal talked about some energy auditors, but let's just go maybe starting with Carl and say, what types of jobs are in your sector? Maybe talk about, like Cal did, about some of the requirements, the salary, and any other sort of things that might be interesting to our audience.
Yes, so a significant portion of what we do is work offshore. So those turbines are gonna be built on the ocean, so to speak. So there's work there involved in construction, offshore construction, but it also ultimately comes on land. And there's work there associated with doing the augmentation at the substations to accommodate the power that's coming from offshore wind turbines. There's a work involved in the construction. There's, when it's up and running, there's O&M work, operation and maintenance. And that work, I find that piece of the work real cool because in a sense, they're gonna have folks going off, and it's like offshore oil rigging, right? You're gonna be going off in vessels for 14 days, staying out there, servicing the turbines those 2 weeks. Then you come back ashore and another crew goes out there. I think that's real cool stuff. It's like, I didn't think of offshore wind like that before I joined the company. But also there's power trading. There's, you know, I talked about maintenance, but there's actually work to do with scheduling the power into the grid because New York ISO has to move the power from where it's being produced to where it's ultimately being consumed. And you need people that actually technically go in and make sure what's being produced is also what's being delivered. But there's a whole spectrum of jobs that will come. I try not to talk too much about the salaries, but we're talking about high-paying jobs here in the state, and so typically they're in the six-figure range. There's training involved to getting there, so there are community colleges and junior colleges that are putting in place some programs. And we can't hire enough of those people, right? Yeah, we can't hire enough of those people. The first project, like I said, is coming. First power is in 2026. The ultimate full operation is in 2027. And so what we expect is folks getting ready now for the jobs to come in 2026. Now, when I say that, that's the first project in Brooklyn. The next one is in Queens. The third one is in Long Island. These are projects that are coming, right? They're not projects on the drawing board. The output from those power plants have been purchased by New York State, and so those projects has the key green lights to move forward. Now there's some approvals involved, which we're still going through, but these are real projects and real opportunities that are coming.
I do have a quick follow-up for you though, Carl. So, but how many, because Cal talked about 200,000 jobs just by 2030, so how many, just estimate jobs would you think from just your Brooklyn, let's just stay in Brooklyn.
Yes, so the first project we're building in Brooklyn is 800 plus megawatts. It's called the Empire Offshore Wind Project. And we're talking about upwards of 5,000 construction jobs. And on an ongoing basis, it will be 1,000 plus to operate and maintain in terms of keeping it going for the next 30 years. So these are long, they're not gonna be here today and disappear tomorrow. These are projects that are gonna last decades.
Yep. I think I'm actually gonna jump to Julia. So Julia, can you answer sort of the same question about, especially in the built environment, you know, E2 does a jobs report, we do a national jobs report, some states jobs reports, and energy efficiency, which is in buildings, is one of the biggest job creators across the country. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about jobs in the building sector, and talk a little bit also about education and the same that Carl did.
Yeah, so I think I will start with education. For example, I think for a job like mine, really understanding it's very important, like what I like to say more than anything is that I'm a building scientist, right? Like I understand how buildings are made, regardless if they consume a lot of little energy, you know? I think this is very important. I have a background in architectural engineering, which is something between architecture and engineering. So it wasn't necessarily focused on this aspect of the building, but I think this is actually what we see lacking in the new generations, that maybe there is too much focus on the sustainability and all those aspects, and we need to, in my personal opinion, we need to go back of architecture, engineering, like understanding the building to make sure that then we can improve them. So this is, I think, a great place to start, and it's very exciting, right? Like, I think is a very comprehensive and holistic education that you can have. So within that, I think in the built environment, this is what, from the design side and the consultant side, this is what I think it's an interesting path to get. On the other side, the GCs, right, the general contractor, the people that build the buildings, and all their so-called subcontractors, right? Like, so the electrician, mechanical, drywall person, masonry, etc. We're living a time when there is a big need for those trades. And those are trades that, again, similarly to what I just said, you need to do your job like correctly, regardless if you're building a green building or whatever, right? So I think it's important to go back. Sometimes when I go on site, I do inspections and I go on site, make sure that materials is installed correctly, etc. We're not talking about, clean energy or all those other concepts. We're just talking about this is the material, you need to install it correctly, and that's it. I think this is a very also exciting career that you can have, and you can start right after high school potentially. There is a huge need there currently. There is a big problem of not enough specialized trades that then eventually can go into the unions or not. I mean, this is a whole crazy word that I don't even understand 100%. But I think that can be a great thing. One thing I want to mention is about electricians. So now in the city, not only in the city, in the country, in the world, there is I'm back. There is a huge push to electrify everything, right? We're talking about solar panel, wind, etc. All those things work if once you get into the building, you can use that electricity to heat your building, to cool your building, hot water, cooking. If we're still running with old boilers, oil, or whatever, not going anywhere. So there is a huge push to electrify everything, so then we can use renewable energy on that. But to do all of that, we need electricians. There aren't so many. So this is another idea that we see a lot in the built environment. Yeah. And then finally, one thing I want to also speak about. So as consultant, part of our job I mentioned, right? We work with the design team. We go on site, do inspection. We also test. We test performance of building in different things, right? Air leakage is a big one, but there are other stuff. And the new energy codes in the built environment, the international energy codes, are going to require more and more testing to be done at the end of construction or after a big rehab to make sure what you did on paper is actually happening. And again, that's another sector where there is a huge lack of professionals doing that. It's an interesting work. You are on site a lot. You are not in messy construction site. You're just in like brand new buildings, just clean, and you just have to test everything, make sure everything is great. So it's actually nice. Yeah, so that's just one thing that we have been asked as Steven Winter Associates to train a bunch of, they first asked if we wanted to do ourselves. We're like, we cannot go test all buildings in New York, so we can train a bunch of people. And we see in the future, with the implementation of the future energy codes, we see a lot of that coming. Yep.
Yeah, so sort of like Cal was talking about, electricians, energy auditors, people to go in and check building performance. These are standard, when you think about clean energy jobs, you might not think about these things, but they're just very standard.
Yeah, I'm always like, let's go back to, basic construction.
Exactly. Oh, Max.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Julia said. I think the building sector as a whole is maybe not everybody's first thought of an energy efficiency job, the same as it would be if you see solar panels being installed or wind turbines being installed. But the reality is that New York City, almost 2/3 of all its carbon emissions are strictly from buildings that are wasting energy, whether that's energy coming in, energy going out, and it not being the right temperature. And that's a huge opportunity for improvement, right? So a couple years ago, New York City passed what's called Local Law 97. All that matters is that it mandates large buildings over 25,000 square feet. There's a lot of those in New York, right? That they have to meet a certain threshold as far as how energy efficient they are, right? People way smarter than myself did a lot of projections, and they expect over 150,000 jobs to be coming straight from that law. So we're in a really exciting time where I think, economics, legislature, and the actual desire to become more climate efficient and recognizing the state we're in, they're all starting to make progress, and the jobs are here, and they're going to keep coming.
Yeah, for sure. And Hydro-Quebec is bringing transmission lines so that New York City can get more clean energy, correct? Yep.
Correct.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit more about the jobs sort of involved in sort of transmission and what you see sort of in the outlook for.
Sure. I'll definitely get to that. But as I was listening to everybody looking around, I think everybody here should give each other a pat on the back getting through COVID, especially all you guys and girls in your 20s, right? You went through some really difficult times. New York City is going through a major transformation, and you guys are really lucky. I don't even know if you realize how lucky you are. When I was in your seat, I was worrying about Y2K, if the internet was going to make the world go down, and it was crazy. All of these projects we're talking about are bringing hundreds of thousands of jobs, tons of money, and on top of it, we're going to get benefits. You're going to breathe better air. We're going to be able to combat climate change. So you're really in a wonderful position to take this forward. So I just want to say that because I want to kind of harness that in you guys. You really are this next generation that's going to do it for us. So we've got these jobs that Carl's talking about. We got the built environment. We have 1 million buildings in New York City, 1 million. So all of these jobs, whether they're electricians, HVAC jobs, these heating and ventilation and air conditioning, super important. I want to give a plug to one of my buddies here, Danelle and Keith in Brooklyn, who started Block Power. They put in heat pumps. Heat pumps are like the revolutionary technology. If you guys don't know what heat pumps are, they could have named it better, you should check it out. They're really going to make things more efficient. So the project that I'm working on is bringing, as you said, bringing hydropower down to mix with Carl's power, which is the offshore, and the solar that's installed. So we can go from a grid that has 90% fossil fuels to 80% renewables by 2030 if we all get these projects done. So that, if you just look at it, you're just shifting this thing on its head. And all of this happening in a very short amount of time where you're going to have opportunities to get involved, right? So the trades, I kind of want to bring it back to that. The Champlain Hudson is 1,400 union construction jobs, right? And there's lots of different types of jobs we talked about. There's private sector jobs. If you can look at getting a union pathway to a job, you have family-sustaining wages. You've got some really good benefits, right? So I think it's important to think about how you get there. And there's pre-apprentice programs, there's trainings that we're going to be helping to support through the Green Economy Fund. So as you start to look at the trades, the skilled labor, and what does that mean on our project? It means everything from dock workers, because this line is going underwater. It's literally going underwater from the Canadian border all the way down into New York City. It's also going to go on a little bit of land, right? So you're going to have to, you need linemen. You need to actually put this line, you have to dig it. You need laborers. You need cement workers. You need every different type of trade. You need electricians, tons of them. There'll be 500 here in New York City to build the first emissions-free converter station in New York City. If you look to Astoria, Queens right now, you have almost 5,000 megawatts of fossil fuel that's been burning there for 100 years. This summer, we're going to start construction on the very first piece of clean energy infrastructure in New York City. And that, thank you very much, I appreciate that. So, because it's a big deal. And this is happening, and we see this throughout New York City. We have disadvantaged communities, that have been bearing the brunt of all of this fossil generation, right? So we're bringing it into Queens and Western Queens. That's the highest asthma rate in Queens. South Brooklyn and South Bronx has the highest asthma rate in the United States of America. So we're talking about jobs, but these jobs are going to mean something at the end of the day. And these are good paying jobs too. And once you get on a track to a union job, back to Carl's point, you're looking at 6 figures. And you're looking at stability. And you have all these projects. So the project I'm working on is 1. Carl's got 2 or 3. There's more coming in. To get to 80% clean energy, we have tons of projects, the building projects. So again, I'm putting myself in your seat. I'd be super hot right now thinking about what I can do next.
Yeah, this transition is the biggest opportunity that we have had. You saw the chart that Cal put on the screen since the Industrial Revolution in 1880, potentially, and how we make sure that this transition touches everybody and lifts all boats, I think, is an absolutely crucial question, which is the one that we're gonna take next. So I'm not sure who might wanna start, but we wanna talk about how do we make sure that this transition is accessible to everybody, that people are able to grab onto this economic opportunity, whether that means, starting a career or whether that means starting your own business. I do want to start with you, Max.
In my opinion, it's not that complicated. A lot of these large projects like Peter's, they are starting to incorporate elements of requiring workforce development in any sort of application for people who want to be awarded the project. So the folks actually doing the work and hiring and getting paid to complete something like the Champlain Hudson Express, there are now, and increasingly as we go on, more incentives to hire people from communities that have historically been left behind, historically been marginalized. So areas like the South Bronx and Astoria, where they're either next to power plants or have high asthma rates, there are incentives to encourage hiring and even requirements for certain projects depending where you're at. So I think as we look at this from a development standpoint on who's doing the work and who's getting paid the profit of the development, even though it's an altruistic one, it has to be included to make sure that it's equitable for the communities it's coming to.
And in some ways, I can see that as a double benefit of working in your community, making money in your community, and benefiting in your community.
Yeah,
so,
everybody wins. There's nothing not to like.
Exactly. Peter?
Yeah, I could jump in. So everything Max said, completely right. I mean, again, I'll bring it back to people are at the center of this movement. This is power for people. This is an opportunity. Education is extremely important. What you're here doing today is you're learning, right? So that whole idea of energy literacy is really important. What are my options, right, to do this? And that makes it more equitable. When you know the information, you can make decisions for yourself and for your family. So, start with that. Yes, I think there's a wonderful part of the law. You have the CLCPA that Kyle talked about. There, are significant investments being made in disadvantaged communities. Again, this is a way to kind of restart and equalize the system in the sense that those communities that in the past, historically, and legacy projects were not part of these, are now very much part of it. And so, you can do everything from going and getting your trainings, but you can also educate yourself, make sure you talk to your elected officials. That's super important. Everybody in here looks like the age to be able to vote. Voting's really important. It's very powerful. You should recognize that. It can lead to laws like we saw before. So, I think what's wonderful about this is that what we're doing at the Green Economy Fund, we have some community engagement projects as well. We worked with Sun Brooklyn, and we actually brought some students up during the Lake Placid Games, which I was really proud of. So these big winter games that happened in the Adirondacks. Who's been to the Adirondacks in this audience? Oh, that's more than I thought, okay? I mean, right, this is a jewel of New York State. It is so preserved, the largest preserved and conserved area in the United States of America, right? And fortunately, there were some really wonderful people from Brooklyn and from the Bronx that were able to go up and experience this. And people of color that were up there to learn the history of the Adirondacks, which was really pivotal in the suffrage movement and the abolitionist movement. And also, was critical to understanding the environment and what the environment can do for us. And so creating these pathways of equity between just our brothers and sisters in the North and down here in the South is also helping us in the transition. So, I'm being really philosophical here, but there's a lot of ways that you can get involved, a lot of ways you can get out of your community and bring back to your community at the same time.
We'll go with Carl.
Sure. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking about jobs and careers, but one of the things that we shouldn't not pay attention to here is the fact that within all of this, so there's a lot of new intermittent variable production resources coming in solar and wind, but the sun doesn't shine all the time and the wind doesn't blow. And so there's a need to balance this out, to round this out by bringing storage, battery storage, hydrogen, green hydrogen storage and whatnot. But I think aside from the jobs being created, the state has been creative in a sense in actually having these carve-outs for minority and women-owned enterprises. There are not enough of those in our community here. And there's a lot of lanes there are a lot of niches there, which if you can construct the right business, Equinor has an innovation hub in Industry City where they're taking, if you're wanting to do or test a concept that could ultimately be tied to green and renewable energy that's coming, there's a place for you to try that, and there are different opportunities and programs like that. But I think that lane where you can start your own company, find those niches, and take full advantage and create these jobs in your community. Because for a long time, Brooklyn and urban centers have been on the consumer side of these, so the power is being produced elsewhere, the jobs are being produced elsewhere, but it's coming into the city and you're paying the bill. And so there's a chance to turn this around, the opportunities now, and I think there's just so many opportunities to start your own, develop and innovate and create something special.
I love it, Carl. Talk to Carl about the Innovation Hub. Julia, last word.
I just wanted to highlight how we're in New York. Like, this is a great opportunity by itself. New York City, also New York State, are compared to the rest of the country. I mean, for sure, California, they're cool too. But, like, for example, the Local Law 97, the Max mentioned, that basically, just to reiterate, is like asking for fees to high emitters, like put it in simple words. So buildings that are consuming too much above certain caps, they're going to have to pay the same way you pay a parking ticket. And this is the first time anyone has ever done it, and it's done in New York. So this is an idea of like how in different ways, not only this, many different ways, we are, the city, New York City is at the forefront of so many initiatives. This obviously triggers a lot of opportunity, not only for jobs, etc., but also to educate yourself. There are tons of, like ways to like attend events, webinars, like conferences, even for free, and also sometimes tailored to emerging professionals or people that are just starting their career. So like this very event, right? So I think this is, and also just go around, walk around in the built environment. As I was saying, I work a lot in affordable housing. Many of my projects are like in the disadvantaged communities, are like here in East New York or East Brooklyn or South Brooklyn, or I work a lot in the Bronx, in South Bronx. I work a lot in Queens. None of my projects are in Manhattan, even if our office is there. So just walk around and like even tour a building, like understanding what's going on in there. I think that's very enlightening. And so I think one way to go back to your regional question, one way to how make sure to start your own business or like grab this opportunity. I think you're already in New York. You're already like lucky, much more lucky than like anywhere else. So use this opportunity, for sure.
I'm reminded what Pete said in the green room, take a bite of the big apple, because that is what we have the opportunity right now to do. And I think, New York is absolutely leading the way. Cal mentioned the Climate Act is the strongest climate law in the nation, also the world. New York is at the forefront, and we have this opportunity because New York is at the forefront, so we should jump at it. So I also want to ask another question. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time before we go to audience questions, about job training. So I'd love to hear more about training programs, and I'm not sure, Max, if I want to start with you and then go to others, but I'd love to hear more about your job training programs.
Yeah, sure. So Solar One, our model works. We partner with a lot of other great nonprofits across the city, many of which are in this room. The Hope Program, Green City Force. I think I saw Charles from We Act. There's so many great organizations doing workforce development across the city. So Solar One is a trainer. People who are interested in a lot of the jobs we've been talking about and entering the industry, they're able to work with our partner organizations. They come to Solar One, and we get right to it. Our programs are about a month in average length, sometimes something as quick as a week, sometimes something longer, up to 2 months, and you're doing a demo, a hands-on example of the real-life work. So you sit in the classroom, understanding the knowledge, and then you're applying it downstairs in our training lab with our instructors. And the goal is to take a lot of these opportunities, condense it into easy-to-understand information, and help people get the skills needed to enter the workforce in a relatively short amount of time and at no cost to them. So a lot of participants at Solar One are typically, maybe post-college age or haven't gone a college-bound track. And this is an opportunity to enter the workforce and take advantage of these clean energy opportunities.
That's great.
And I want to highlight our new industry engagement team who's here today and will be here this afternoon. There's more information on Solar One programs, some of the partners we can work with, and how, if this sounds like something you're interested in, we could share those opportunities.
So you guys have a table up?
We do, yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Pete, do you have?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in. I got some advice probably when I was around your age, and it's, don't tell me, show me, do it, right? So what we got right now are these wonderful training programs, and there's tons of them around New York City and around the state. I think this is really important to raise awareness on this fund that we have, which is the Green Economy Fund. Again, I talked about it earlier. It's $40 million. $2 million are going out this year. We have an RFP on the street right now for workforce training programs and partnering to put the proposals in, and by April 28th, these are going to come in, and we're going to be awarding some workforce development programs that are really going to start doing what we're talking about right now, is training people to get those jobs. And it could be all different types of jobs that we discussed today. So I just wanted to put a plug for that because I think it's really important. I know everybody on this panel is really active in this space. So yeah, I encourage you to do that. And like Max said, they can be varying lengths of time for the trainings, but at the end of the day, they're putting you on a pathway to something. And the training, in an ideal world, should lead to a career and a job. We're talking about jobs. We really want to get you guys careers out there, right? I mean, some people were too used to just hopping from one thing to the other. Sometimes the stability of a career can help you in your life as you're planning. So again, this is another opportunity to say, I can find a career path. How do I get it? What are the tools? These workforce development training programs are tools. Pre-apprentice programs are tools. Getting into your career path starts at your age. So this is just perfect timing.
Yeah, and I'm reminded also of what Cal, I keep referring back to you, Cal. I'm reminded also of what Cal said about sort of starting as a solar installer and going to a project manager. It's just, the natural progression of a career and work. And so I also, Carl, I wanted to mention, so offshore wind in New York, I mean, this is a huge deal. There's just so much buzz around it. It's like one of the first huge things, and there's a whole component of job. I'm moving my microphone because my hands are doing the talking. But there's this whole component of offshore wind job training, placement, all of that. Can you talk a little bit about that, or Equinor, either one?
Yes, so the offshore wind is much further along in Europe, and that's where the company, frankly, started its business in offshore wind. But many of the training programs are needed are multi-year in nature because it's not necessarily a 4-year engineering program. I'm an electrical engineer by training, so I did 4 years there. But in general, a 2-year community college associate degree is the way to go. We can't hire enough of those guys coming out with associate degrees. Last summer we had, and they're not that I'm aware of at least, I don't think there's one that's up and running in New York State, at least not yet, and someone can correct me. I know in Massachusetts there is, a couple of New England states, a couple of the community colleges have put programs in place. But those are the kind of training that puts you on a pathway to having the career with the sustainability and the durability we're talking about here. But Equinor, like I alluded to earlier, has some innovation programs. One is here in Brooklyn. There are a couple in Boston area, and there's one in Houston. But there are these labs we're creating. There are these investments we're making in the community. And we can't take credit for this. The state itself required of us as a developer to have those auxiliary programs. So it's not just bidding the lowest price and winning a contract. It's also having these programs in place to move the community forward. And so many of those tens of millions that Pete is talking about is in the community. It's there to be pursued, but it's a combination of programs and training that are going to put you on the path to succeeding in this area. It's dramatic. The program, the vastness of this, I think Max already alluded to it, but only 20% of the way we supply our energy comes, to the extent there is a clean climate leadership, CPA program, only 20% of the greenhouse gas comes from power. And so there's still a lot that happens in transportation and the commercial, industrial, and residential loads, and there's a lot of opportunities there as well. So I'm just a small piece of that, but there's opportunities all around for us to get involved in that.
So I think we're gonna start with some audience questions. And we're gonna have the mic come around.
Oh,
There
is
you
this
go.
working? Yes. Okay. Does anybody have questions for our excellent panelists? Yes.
Hi, my name is Malachi. Well, I would like to ask, are your groups like, do you guys do work with, so I know National Grid is like another developer of offshore wind, or they have like a wind branch to their enterprise and stuff like that. So would you guys be doing work with them or other utility services that are trying to go green?
I'm just gonna repeat the question for the live stream. Do you guys work with other utilities in the state, like National Grid, Con Ed, that are trying to go green?
I mean, yeah, I can jump in right away, and just for this project coming down, for example. So let's take a step back. Hydro-Quebec has been selling renewable power to the northern part of New York for a very long time, right? So working with all our industry partners up there, other utilities. Transmission is the other T that I didn't talk about is enough. Like, transmission brings the power where you're going to consume it. So it's a really critical piece. Without bringing it there, we could talk about it, but you're not going to be able to consume it, right? So there's going to be a lot of work to be done in transmission. And then when you bring the power to the center, the load center that Carl's talking about, you tap into Con Edison that we all know. We probably say, I got that bill again that I got to pay. But they're distributing this power, right? And so to answer your question, of course we're working with them. We're bringing all this power into the city, right? It'll get, in the case of the project I'm working on, it comes down on a DC. So it comes down, maybe 2% loss, hardly any loss on the power that comes through. Then it gets converted to AC at the converter station I was talking about. Then it gets pumped out to the entire system here. So we work on an everyday basis, pretty much, with Con Edison?
Yeah, so offshore wind, to Pete's point, no matter what we do, where we do, ultimately it gets the Con Ed system here when we're talking about Brooklyn, or if it's on Long Island, we talk about LIPA or PSEC Long Island. But ultimately, they'll have to build out their system, upgrade their system to accommodate our power, our production. And so ultimately, we have to work hand in glove with them to find more efficient solutions. And so, yeah, we work seamlessly with the utilities here.
Thank you, Malachi, for that question. We have a couple.
And more importantly, that results in more jobs, right? So they need people to perform the upgrades and the augmentation to their grid. So that's the key.
Do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Well, yeah, because I know that they're currently building maybe bigger turbines, like more gigawatts and everything like that to really accommodate it. I know about a couple projects off of the coast of Long Island and everything that National Grid has been working on. So that's why it was really dope to hear about another company. You said the leader in offshore energy, so that was really dope.
Yeah, we've signed the most offshore wind power contracts in the state so far. But yeah, I've kind of been reluctant to say anything about National Grid because we compete with them, right? We're on the generation side of things, so we're trying to get to the same ultimate outcome. Pete, I need Pete's transmission to get to the end user, but National Grid is developing projects like myself, and so we're a competitor of theirs.
Yeah, I'm interested in I don't know, Mr. Rose, if there's a substation that stores energy, and I know most wind projects also store energy, and lithium ion is the way, but it's a very extractive technology. So I'm wondering if you're planning ahead for cleaner battery storage in the future when you plan these projects.
Yeah, so the question is for the live stream is on battery storage, lithium, mining, and sort of what do we see as far as that and or better ways, cleaner ways, if there are to do it?
So that's actually my day job. I'm in the energy storage side of Equinor, right? So again, where on one hand, we're producing power from wind, but it's intermittent, it's variable, and it produces at times when it's not necessarily needed as much. So that's where, as a broad energy company, a multi-technology company, we are developing battery storage projects in New York as well. We bought a company that's East Coast based that's spearheading that part of our business. There's also green hydrogen, where offshore, through electrolysis, you're converting the electrons to hydrogen, and if it makes sense to put it to the transportation sector, we'll do that directly, or convert it back to power at the times when it's more needed. But that's part of the broad energy multi-tech, market-driven power producer strategy, where we're not just there to be an offshore wind seller into the system, but we have the overall health of the system, the reliability and the resiliency in mind, and develop that multi-tech solution. But it's a key part